Thank you. My name is Hank Klibanoff. I'm in the journalism program, professor over there. I spent a few days last week in St. Petersburg, Florida at the Poynter Institute, which trains journalists. It was a meeting of the Associated Press Managing Editors Organization that I used to be part of when I was managing editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And I encountered a friend of mine who's a Southern managing editor also. He's a fairly conservative politically, and we were just commenting on a lot of the noise that is on the airwaves these days, noise that passes for news but truly isn't. And he said, he began lamenting. He said, you know, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm starting to miss the fairness doctrine. And let me, for those of you who don't know, tell you the Fairness Doctrine was created by the Federal Communications Commission in 1949. It was a great year. I was created that same year. And it, by the Federal Communications Commission, right. I'm bringing you this message. I approve it. But it mandated that broadcast outlets had to, one, they had to cover public affairs. They had to cover important issues. And two, that they had to cover them fairly and they had to be equitable. They had to be honest. There was a fairly high standard. And that they had to offer contrasting points of view. So many of us can remember a time when that became the standard, where contrasting points of view were mandated on the airwaves. As a result of legal challenges that were unresolved, some upholding the Fairness Doctrine, though some which threatened to tear it down, the FCC, rather than face a Supreme Court battle, just pulled it back in 1987. And it was in 1987 that we began on this course that we're on now, where the airwaves, in particular radio, are filled with a completely different tone and tenor of political discussion than we had prior to that time. And it has changed very much about the way we hear and get and absorb information about politics in this country. I'm not favoring reinstatement of that, and I don't think my friend was either. Though there is great fear among talk radio people that that is what some people want, and particularly they believe that's what the Democrats want. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I will say, as a journalist, I have my concerns about its reinstatement and whether it runs counter to First Amendment issues, but that's neither here nor there. I think what we face with that, however, is that we are, if you take that coupled with the decline in newspapers in this country and the explosion, the atomization of online organizations giving you either real or their own shaded forms of news about politics, we are at one and the same time both the most informed political electorate we've ever been and the most misinformed. And it's very difficult for people to sort through all this. And I have this concern about that because my own area of research in the South and my own life in the South from that fateful year, I grew up at a time when misinformation in the South gave rise to some pretty ugly leadership. And we saw what demagogues will do, what people will do when they want to take advantage of an uninformed, ill-informed, misinformed electorate. I spent some time trying to find the best definition I could of what a demagogue was, because I hear it, demagoguery, on the radio and on television. And you may think I'm only talking about people from the right. And I'm not. I will say this, it can be fairly well established and stipulated that that voices on the right were far, far more effective at taking command of the airwaves than those on the left. And I also want to say that they did it fair and square. There was nothing dishonest about it. But those voices that have gained control over the last few years, and they're sort of rose mostly to prominence during the '92 campaign. They're full throttle now, and they did it fair and square as best I can tell. But but it's also on the left. I mean, I have no more pleasure watching a Keith Olbermann or Rachel Maddow than I do Sean Hannity or Neil Bortz or Savage or any of those people when it comes to trying to ascertain truth or truthiness. But here, see if this reminds you of anybody when you read this definition, when you hear this definition of demagogue. It was put together by a prison psychologist for the purposes of the Nuremberg trial. He said, a demagogue is a person who seeks notoriety and power by exploiting the fears and desires of the people, offering scapegoats and dogmatic panaceas in an unscrupulous attempt to hold himself forth as the champion of their values, needs, and institutions. His behavior is guided more by its potential effect in beguiling public opinion than by any scrupulous regard for the truth, for the basic social values, or for the integrity of the individual in his person, property, livelihood, or reputation. So that's the kind of demagogue that I grew up with under George Wallace, Ross Barnett, Orville Faubus. But now we've seen it on the airwaves, and you hear it every day, and it can be quite scary. I'm not sure how it is that we've allowed people on the radio to so strongly advocate for particular people to be elected. But it is now there, you know, at this hour on WSB, there is someone on the air who is advocating the election of specific people from a specific party and a specific end of the political spectrum. And it's just a free ad. It's a free ad for anybody that that person agrees with. And so I have a feeling that from my perspective as a person who loves news, who grew up in the news media, who cares deeply that newspapers, television, internet, radio, be able to provide people something approximating truth has now been sullied and soiled by all of this and by the confusion and the cognitive dissonance that these people have been so good at bringing about. It is, as a friend of mine who wrote a book under this name, it's data smog and the abuse of I think of the electorate. I will say that I was this morning, and I listened to them. I was listening to Neil Bortz this morning, and I enjoy listening to him sometimes. I enjoy listening to all of them. I don't. Sometimes it can make me storm out of the house or off the road. But I heard him say something today. Neil Bortz was talking about Keith Olbermann, and he said of Keith Olbermann, he said, he's a nutcase. That guy's likely to say anything. And I thought, put them together and let's just ship them off somewhere, and maybe we can all talk to, you know, just listen to those who really know what's going on, and we'll be a much better informed electorate when we get to the ballot box on Tuesday. That's a start. Thank you.